Welcome in to Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in to Daily Faceoff Live. It's a Friday, October 21st edition. Happy Friday to Matt Larkin, our dailyfaceoff.com managing editor and senior writer. Matt, how you doing?
I'm good, Frank. I'm feeling good. I've got some fun stats to unleash on the show today. I'm just excited to bust them out.
Okay, well, let's start. Let's throw 2 minutes and 30 seconds up on the clock. Let's not waste any time. Statman is here. And let's start with Nick Robertson. You were in the building at Scotiabank Arena on Thursday night as he busted through in a big way with the Toronto Maple Leafs. They get a win, take a little bit of the heat off of what's been a somewhat tumultuous start, as Sheldon Keefe was also out there explaining himself seemingly yet again. But Nick Robertson, a guy who was a salary cap casualty, gets 2 goals, including the OT winner, against the Dallas Stars as his brother watched on from the bench.
It was amazing. It was sort of a perfect storybook night for Nick Robertson. And of course, the goals were impressive. They were real goal scorers' goals. He's got a great release. We knew that. He had 55 goals in 46 games his last year major junior. He had 16 goals in 28 games in the AHL last year. It's not a surprise to see him score goals like that. What stood out to me was the back check that led to that goal. It was him showing a lot of fight to his game, commitment to 200 feet of the ice. And to me, that's the most encouraging thing we saw. Even Sheldon Keefe referenced that after the game. We're seeing a more mature version of Nick Robertson, who's also blocking out the noise. He even said he didn't even think about his brother last night, aside from one little cross check he took because he was so focused on the game. And a mature Nick Robertson who's doing something all over the ice for the Leafs, that's someone that can really help in their top 6.
Man, brother on brother crime this week. Austin Nola and the San Diego Padres against his brother Aaron Nola, as I watched the Philadelphia Phillies in the NLCS. You got Nick and Jason Robertson. Big question for you is, where does Nick Robertson slot in for the Toronto Maple Leafs moving forward? Like, do you think the success of his brother and what's worked for his brother can rub off on him? Can he be something big for the Leafs, or do you see him as more a B-level prospect? Where is he in the organizational depth chart?
I think the ceiling is absolutely there. It always has been. It was pretty much, a year after he was drafted, he was declared a steal, falling to the second round. So to me, he's the type of player that if he's in the NHL, you need him on a scoring line. We saw him on the second line last night. And it was telling that Sheldon Keefe said after the game, he almost rolled Robertson out there for the start of 3-on-3. That's how much confidence he was feeling in the youngster. So to me, it's a matter of, can Robertson stay healthy and can he stay committed to both ends of the ice? Because that's what's going to keep him at the NHL level. I think the ceiling is there, though. It doesn't mean he's a sure thing, but I think the Leafs need someone from within on an entry-level AAV to contribute, and he could be that guy.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear Sheldon Keefe say that out loud, that he had to talk himself out of putting Robertson out there to start overtime. Do you sense any extra second-guessing from Keefe, given the way this week has unfurled?
I think a little bit, but it's funny. He did say after the game last night that everything in the Leafs room was normal this week. He said all the craziness was here, pointing to us, gesturing to the media. He said that's where the tension was coming from. But he was not feeling it in the room. So sort of the temperature around the team is that it's too early to worry.
Let's talk about the Buffalo Sabres, because Rasmus Dahlin has set an NHL record. Yes, one that not even Bobby Orr could accomplish. He's the first defenseman in NHL history to score a goal in each of his first 4 games of a season. He did that on Thursday night in Calgary as the Buffalo Sabres ran roughshod over the province of Alberga, sweeping both the Flames and the Oilers. And Eric Comrie was fantastic in net. But got to talk about Dahlin and this sort of eye-popping start to the season for him. We were all kind of expecting, as the Sabres are the first blue line in NHL history, to have 2 number 1 overall picks on the same defensive unit. But we were expecting this to be Owen Power's coming out party, and yet it's Dahlin, the guy that's been an unbelievable revelation for Buffalo to this point.
That's right. And I'm not actually that surprised to see it happening, because I think people forget how young Rasmus Dahlin still is. It takes time to develop as a big young defenseman. So here's one of my big stats for you, Frank. 220 defensemen have played a game in the NHL this year. Only 16 of them are younger than Rasmus Dahlin. He is younger than 92% of the defensemen playing in the NHL right now. That's how young he still is. That's how much time he still has left to develop. And if you look at some comparables, defensemen that were very ballyhooed as first-round picks that took some time to develop. Victor Hedman's breakout season, 2013-14, he was 22 years old. Chris Pronger's breakout season, 96-97, he turned 22 that October. How old is Rasmus Dahlin? He is 22 years old.
Interesting. I love the stat. I mean, it's perspective, right? Like that's what you're looking for is, hey, what happened to this guy, Rasmus Dahlin, highly touted number 1 overall pick that hasn't really done a lot. Well, he hasn't really been supported properly by the Buffalo Sabres. Kind of like, hey, get in there in the NHL and let's see what you got, kid. This is not a developmental league. And I thought it was a great sign that Owen Power went back to college last year as a reminder for us all that not everyone takes the same path. It's not a straight line forward. And development can sometimes come in peaks and valleys. And when you see Dahlin now starring on the big stage for the Sabres, that's hugely important for this team and their future. You know what else is hugely important? That would be Eric Comrie in net. Mike McKenna wrote a great story on dailyfaceoff.com earlier this week after Comrie basically stifled the Edmonton Oilers and their offense with another 40-plus save performance, which he then repeated against the Calgary Flames. He said that he saw some traits in Comrie to start that, maybe are proof that he could be the real deal. After a guy that's gone through waivers a few times, could the Sabres finally have their goalie?
I think it's possible. I was kind of excited when I saw that they signed him because coming up in the Jets system as sort of a B-level prospect, he had a lot of potential. He had a good major junior career, and he just hasn't had that opportunity. And with Craig Anderson, with all due respect to Craig Anderson, he's getting up there in age. He's not stiff competition. So I do think there's a chance for Comrie to take this job and absolutely run with it this year.
Yeah, Eric Comrie busting through at the age of 27, which is not really an unusual age for goalies to get to that point in the NHL. Let's talk about the Montreal Canadiens because it was kind of an electrifying night for the Habs. I know there's not much in the way of expectations and probably need to celebrate those for the Habs, those milestones in October when you can get them. They tee off on the Montreal Canadiens, but it was a number of exciting things in the way of Juraj Slafkovsky, the number 1 overall pick, getting his first NHL goal. That was exciting, but not nearly as exciting as this fight that we saw from Wi-Fi. That's Arbor Jacki, and you'll know it's Wi-Fi because of the way his name is spelled. So check this out from Arbor Jacki as he takes on one of the most feared players in the NHL. No fear whatsoever. And that's Zach Kassian that he's pummeling, just so you know. And we did have a little clip before. You can't hear the sound, but it was X gonna give it to you. And X did give it to Kassian, just straight up ragdolling him. This is not something that you see all that often for a guy that's 21 years old and stepping into the league right from major junior. I love his quote after the game, basically saying like, yeah, you want it, come and get it. Like, I'm here and I'm not going to back down from anyone.
It was amazing, and it's been such a fun story for a guy who was literally, there's DMX, there we go, but who was Costco employee and looked like he was, never going to even get a shot to be on an NHL roster. And here he is making a difference with the Habs. I did a double take last night when I realized that Zach Kassian getting pummeled like that. And I'm just liking the excitement he's bringing. And also, I think the Habs are using him well. They're putting him on the third pair right now. They're not giving him the hardest matchups. So he's fairly sheltered. And so far, the results have been pretty good. The ice is tilted slightly in the Habs' favor when Jackie's out there. And on top of that, he's bringing energy. He's bringing a sort of a fan favorite type of personality. It's been a really fun story. And also, I friggin' love the nickname. I'm so tired of lazy modern hockey nicknames. You'd think his last name is pronounced Jacki. Typically, he'd be called Jacker. Hey, Jacker, yeah, good game, bud. Nope, Wi-Fi. That's a legitimate original name, a throwback to like the 1950s in terms of creative nicknames. I love it.
Yeah, but well before they had Wi-Fi, of course. Yeah, you see the tail of the tape there. He's a big boy, 238 pounds. His first career fight is certainly memorable. And, I kind of feel for Zach Kassian here. He gets traded to Arizona, a team that's not trying to win. He's a cap casualty. You can't fake your way through fighting in the NHL. I'm not saying that he did. Maybe he was just manhandled by Jacki, but it's tough to go through the motions as a fighter in the NHL.
It's true. And we're sort of seeing the plot of the movie Goon play out there, which is an unknown sort of surprise underdog story, a young kid rising up and taking on the guy that has the reputation as one of the tougher players in the league. And if you lose to the kid, then where do you go from there?
Yeah, kudos to Zach Cassian for obliging that as well, because you don't have to say yes. And certainly some ferocious tenacity from Arbor Jackeye to start, a guy that's been relentless on pucks for the Montreal Canadiens, and a great story. Let's talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins, who have been a great story so far this year. And I had the Penguins firmly slotted in a playoff spot as we went through our season predictions on Daily Faceoff. They're off to a 3-0-1 start. And I said, you know what? Maybe this team could be better than I thought. And, they get off to a 3-0-1 start, and you look at where they stack up at the top of the Metro to this point without a loss in regulation. One of only two teams in the entire Eastern Conference that have that distinction. But Matt, you kind of look at this and you think maybe the Pittsburgh Penguins are exactly what they've been for the last, I don't know, handful of years.
Yes, I do. And what they've been is a great regular season team. This isn't news. Every single season under Mike Sullivan, they've been at least 610 in points percentage. So when I see them looking pretty dominant early, I kind of shrug my shoulders and say, okay, I'll see you in April, because the problems with the construction of the Penguins roster, especially in the forward group, I do not think have been rectified. What happens to this team every single year is they look good in the regular season. They often fight through injuries, and they get pushed around in the playoffs when the officials put their whistles away. And if you look at the construction right now, here comes some more big stats for you, Frank. The smallest team in the NHL by weight is the Pittsburgh Penguins, 193 pounds. The biggest team is Tampa Bay, 206. That's an average weight disparity from player to player of 13 pounds. The oldest team in the NHL by average age is the Pittsburgh Penguins. So this is the smallest, oldest team in the NHL. And I cannot feel confident about that group making a deep run when we get to the playoffs.
Man, stat guy's bringing it today. I just look at this Penguins team and I say they're better suited for playoff success. I'm not saying they're going to have any. I'm just saying they're better suited for playoff success given the additions that they made on their back end. When you look at Jeff Petrie, I think that he's got a lot more to give. Jan Ruda, a big underrated part of those two Stanley Cup runs for the Tampa Bay Lightning. The guy just defends well, and you need that. Tristan Jarry's been really good to start. And, I just feel like with Sidney Crosby, I don't know that, everyone kind of yawns when talking about Sidney Crosby because there's nothing new here. It's the same thing on repeat, consistency, year after year after year. But his last 82 games, he's got 103 points. Like, Sidney Crosby, still elite. Like, this team, I think, could do a little bit more damage this time around based on the additions that they've made on their back end. Agree or disagree?
I do agree that the back end additions are encouraging, especially when it comes to Jeff Petrie. And something that you wrote last year, I remembered, it stuck in my head, which was Jeff Petrie hasn't suddenly forgotten how to play hockey. And I agreed at the time. I still agree now. He does so many different things well on the ice. He can move the puck for a pretty big guy. He's physical. He can be a leader. He does so many different things. So I do like that addition a lot.
Okay, let's get to some fantasy hockey talk with Nick Alberga. Pleased to welcome back to Daily Faceoff Live, Nick Alberga, part of the Nation Network and Leafs Morning Take, which you can watch just before Daily Faceoff Live at 11 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday on the Nation Network YouTube channel. Nick, how you doing?
I'm fantastic. How are you guys today?
We are good. Let's get to some fantasy hockey talk. And I know it's early in the season. We're still just rounding out week 2, but who have been the biggest fantasy surprises for you to this point in the season for all of our poolies out there?
Yeah, there's been a variety of them, and certainly I think the three names that I'm bringing to the table, many of you would agree with, starting with Valeri Nichushkin of the Colorado Avalanche. I thought he would have a really good season. Obviously, Colorado was looking for that guy to take that next step to fill in for the departed Nazem Kadri, but so far, Nichushkin's been out of this world. A top 10 fantasy file. You look at his body of work, certainly just ripping it up on the power play as well with 5 power play points, but 15 shots on goal. 8 points and 5 goals in his first 4 games. Like, he's been everywhere for the Colorado Avalanche. So I think he's been a nice diamond in the rough for fantasy owners. From there, we go to Philadelphia and Carter Hart and what he's put together so far. Again, as you reference, small sample size, but you have to be really, really intrigued by the Philadelphia Flyers right now and what Hart is doing. He's the guy we expected a couple years back. And as you guys mentioned a bit earlier on with Eric Comrie, it does take a bit longer even for goalies with pedigree, like a guy like Carter Hart, to take that next step. 3-0-0, a 2 GAA, a 943 save percentage. Is that sustainable? Very, very unlikely. but I think he has a bounce back season at the very least for the Philadelphia Flyers. And the last name I would bring up that's really impressed me so far is Vinny Trocheck with the New York Rangers, a top 6 fixture, the attachment of Artemi Panarin. He's got 6 points in 5 games, 2 power play points, and 20 shots on goal. In the fantasy world, we love these guys who can do a bit of everything, the stat stuffers, if you will. And guys like this right now are really, really producing, especially considering their average draft position, right?
For sure. And speaking of guys that are the stat stuffers, Nick, I wanted to ask you about Andrei Svechnikov. And he's someone who has sort of tantalized the fantasy community because he does have that ability to give the statistical buffet, lots of shots, lots of hits, lots of goals, but he hasn't broken through for that truly elite season yet. He's had, career high 30 goals, 69 points. And yet he's only 22 years old. He's got 6 goals already in 4 games, including a hat trick. So what I want to know is, do you think this is it? This is the year that he breaks through, and will he be a first rounder in fantasy drafts next year?
I think he's going to get to that territory, truthfully. And I couldn't believe this is only, year 5 of Andrei Svechnikov. As you referenced, it's hard to forget he's just 22. He hasn't even hit his sort of pinnacle as to what he's going to be in the NHL. You look at the numbers from last year, 30 goals, 69 points, nice in 78 games. He's a guy who I think can get to that level where he's averaging at least a point per game. And then on top of that, imagine a Carolina team who, by the way, I picked to win the Stanley Cup this season. Fingers crossed, Max Pacioretty can return and be the same viable threat. Imagine him and Svechnikov in the top 6 there. I think that's a dynamic duo waiting to happen. And I think from the Svechnikov point of view, we've been waiting for this for a couple years in the fantasy world, and I think it's here. And to that point, obviously the 33.2% shooting percentage is unsustainable. But even if he hits at his career as of 12.1%, even a bit above that, I think this guy's going to score a plenty of goals this season. I think I like what he's brought to the table too with Kotkaniemi and Martin Necas so far on the second line.
Yeah, I too picked the Carolina Hurricanes to win the Stanley Cup this year.
Love
Fascinated to see this team as they continue to grow under Rod Brind'Amour. Some big injury news this week, Nick. We had Gabriel Landeskog out 12 weeks. Probably nothing bigger than Aaron Ekblad and the hole that's on the Florida Panthers blue line with his injury. An unclear timeline to this point. You've got really, I've told somewhere around 6 weeks. Looks like a groin strain, but it's impossible to put a confirmed timeline on it at this point for the Panthers. And they can't really go out and add someone based on their situation with the cap. So my question to you is there anyone from a fantasy perspective that could, maybe benefit from Ekblad being out?
Yeah, well, that's a thing pertaining to the Florida Panthers. As you mentioned, they're going to need the money when he does come back in the time you allotted there. And certainly I think you look internally for the replacement. I couldn't run quick enough to pick up Gustav Forsling off the waiver wire. He jumped 16% in an hour after the Ekblad news went local and went viral here. I think Forsling's your guy, whether you trade for him or he's still readily available in your fantasy league. You look at his body of work so far in this early season, 4 points, a goal and 3 helpers, 15 shots on goal. That's the big thing too. If you're big into shot props, look at Gustav Forsling. You might be able to find some plus value on shot props for him. And I think he's going to take a lot of the important minutes away, namely the power play. I know he's on PP2 right now. But I could see him promoted to power play 1 any second. The other guy would be Brandon Montour as well, but to a lesser extent. I really like Gustav Forsling to replace Ekblad in the short term there with the Panthers. He proved it last year. And some other external options I would look at, by the way, Shane Gostisbehere, Kalen Addison's been on fire the last couple games, who we've pimped the last couple weeks on this program. And then Neil Pionk with the Winnipeg Jets has had a nice set of games here. So I think if you look deep enough and hard enough, you'll be able to find some value on the waiver wire.
Man, Gustav Forsling, hope he's in shape because he's going to be tired given his ice time. 26:04 last game, 28:14 the game before that. It's a ton of work available on the Florida Panthers blue line, relying heavily on Forsling, Gudas, Staal, and now Montour, as you mentioned, to try and patch up that thin blue line with Aaron Ekblad out for the next month and change. This has been great. Thanks a lot to Nick Alberga for joining us today for some fantasy talk on Daily Faceoff Live. This segment has been brought to you by DoorDash. You see the promo code there at the bottom of your screen. Game Day 25 gets you 25% off and free delivery on your first order with DoorDash. All your favorites and more delivered right to your door by DoorDash. Thanks, Nick.
I'm going to order something right now. Thanks so much, Frank.
All right, Matt, it's time for our daily face-off inbox question of the day. And I know they picked up the win in overtime against the hapless Vancouver Canucks on Thursday evening. But prior to that, the Minnesota Wild, it was a battle of offers against the Vancouver Canucks heading into that game. They started 0-3. So on a 1 to 10 scale for a team that many picked as a Stanley Cup contender this year, what's your level of concern for the Minnesota Wild and their start?
I'm going to say a 6 out of 10 because it's been a head scratching start in that the nature of the struggles are not what I expected. I thought maybe this team would regress offensively. Of course, you remove Kevin Fiala from the equation. You have to sort of project a guy like Marco Rossi to be an instant contributor and replace him. And so far, it hasn't happened. He hasn't quite looked ready for the moment. But the reason for the struggles has been defensive play. And the Wild, the last several seasons, have been one of the best defensive teams in the NHL. They've been top 2 the last several years in a row at limiting chances, high danger chances. And right now, that's not the case. They're bleeding scoring chances. So I'm trying to figure that out. Does that mean, okay, it's been their identity? Most of their decor, aside from Kalen Addison coming in, has been the same. So maybe they're going to regress positively and be fine. But what I'm wondering is, with the weakened forward group, are they just putting too much pressure on the decor because they're not keeping the puck in the other team's zone as much? Maybe that is the source of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, 23 goals against at the end of the day. I don't care how it happens. 23 in 4 games is way too much. And, that's why for me, the level of concern is a 5. I don't think Marc-Andre Fleury is going to struggle nearly as much as he has. I'm sure he'll get into a rhythm. And Dean Evison and his group will continue to make changes to get that team back to the level that they were at previously defensively. I don't think they're going to have any issues scoring goals. So I don't know. I'd expect a big rebound from the Wild here in short order. That brings us to our daily face-off Pointsbet daily bet segment. Tyler Yaremchuk, how'd you do last night, big boy?
Well, remember, it was a busy night for me last night, but
Yeah.
I'll
The
frame it a
old
positive
9
way.
played degenerate special.
Only 5 of them were hockey plays. It was the sports equinox, Frank. I was just getting in the spirit of things. But out of my 5 NHL plays, I was perfect on anything that didn't involve Mika Zibanejad. That's a good spin. I was 3-2 on the night. I missed on the Zibanejad shot prop by 1, and he didn't pick up an assist, but we nailed the Crosby assist, the Brent Burns shot prop, and the Vegas Golden Knights did me a solid and covered the puck line as well. Tonight, quieter night in the NHL, but I still dug up 3 plays that I like, so let's jump into them, courtesy of our friends at PointsBet Canada, starting with at the top there, Lightning and Panthers. Now, I debated, I'm still thinking about it. The Lightning on the money line, I don't think is a terrible spot, but I'm actually playing it a little bit safer in this one, in my opinion. I'm going with the Steven Stamkos shot prop. The line is set at 3.5. It's paying plus 105. His shots so far this season, 5, 7, 4, and 5. So he's hit this in every game. In 3 of the games, he's hit it easily. So getting plus money on that Stamkos prop is a really good spot for me. In this Detroit-Chicago matchup, again, I debated taking Detroit on the money line, but I'm chickening out a little bit. Actually, not really, because it's a juicier bet. Dylan Larkin to pick up an assist. He's got 3 in 3 games so far. He's hit it in 2 of the 3 games, and it's plus 130. I think the Red Wings will be able to score a lot against Peter Mrazek. He's got a 3.5 goals against average. So a Dylan Larkin assist at plus 130 is my play for that game. And in the Kraken Avs game, I'm taking the Avs on the puck line minus 110. They've covered it once already on home ice this year. They are coming off a loss on home, though, in OT to the Winnipeg Jets. I think it's a great bounce back spot. Avs should be hungry. The Kraken are not that good. I'll take the better team on home ice to cover the puck line at minus 110. So it's that, the Larkin assists, Stamkos shot prop. Frank, those are my 3 plays.
Love to see it. Best of luck to Tyler Yaremchuk with his action on Friday night. That brings us to garbage time, Matt. And normally I would cede the floor to you, but I wanted to give a little love to Eric Staal today, now of the Florida Panthers. He's been with them all training camp. They finally got some cap space to offer him a contract, and he has agreed to terms on a 1-year deal for $750,000. And why is this newsworthy or important? Because Eric Staal did not play in the National Hockey League last year to take a year off and make it back to the NHL with a good team at the age of 37. Given all that he's accomplished in his career, and to have a chance to play with his brother Mark is pretty awesome. He played, of course, with Jordan in Carolina, and now to get a chance with Mark again in Florida is pretty cool. And also, you have to think that the Paul Maurice trust factor weighs into this heavily as well. Who would know better than what Eric Staal can bring to the team and the ice than Paul Maurice, his coach in Carolina? So love the fit, love the story. And, unfortunately, it's an injury that allows the Florida Panthers to make it happen. But in this case, I don't know that you can go wrong if you have something that pops up and you need an Eric Staal in your lineup. He's a pretty consistent and reliable guy.
For sure. And I think you hit the nail on the head, especially in reference to Paul Maurice, because there's going to be a shorthand there between player and coach. And I think it's going to be very important. If you look at the Florida Panthers dressing room and the leadership situation, they're down Jonathan Huberdeau, who was, from any player I talked to on the team last year, very important to that room. He was very funny, very personable, and losing him from that room was a big wound, I think, for the team. And of course, now Aaron Ekblad's out of the equation. I know Ekblad doesn't wear the C, but for all intents and purposes, he's sort of like a captain because he's a more vocal guy than Sasha Barkov. And I remember talking to Bill Zito before the season, and he was just going on and on about how good of a leader Ekblad is. So you've lost those two from the room. You need some direction for a team that has a lot of new faces, whether it's Colin White and Matthew Tkachuk, Rudolph Balcers, the list goes on and on. So you bring in a stabilizing voice who's been around the block, who knows your coach really well. So just from a room standpoint, I really understand the move, and I like it for Florida.
Agreed. Well said. That'll do it for today's edition, Matt, of Daily Faceoff Live. Thanks to Matt Larkin. Thanks to Nick Alberga, Tyler Remchuk, and our head of production in Alex Allard. Great week of shows. If you've missed any, catch up on podcast form on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, and hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube as well so you never miss an episode. We'll be back with you Monday, 12 noon Eastern. You know where to find us. Until then, keep it locked on dailyfaceoff.com. And have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.